Maybe, yeah, we can turn off either. Good evening, everyone. Just a first check. I hope on Zoom the sound is correct. If there is any problem, just let us know by the chat. Welcome, everyone. We are here very happy to welcome Anne-Marie Filaire, photographer, for this third session, urban and environmental theory session, which is part of the MAS program, MAS in urban and territorial design, that have been introduced with ETH Zurich and EPFL last year. And so here we are at the middle of our second cycle of session. We are very happy to introduce our guest tonight with a specific gaze on the territory, the gaze of the photographer, but not only photographer. Anne-Marie Filaire is photographer, and she teaches also in the Sciences Politiques Paris Institute of Political Studies. To introduce her work has been presented in many museums in Europe, at least in Paris, also in the Muséum d'Art National Moderne, Centre Pompidou, and the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. In the museum, also the new Museum of Civilization of Europe and the Mediterranean, and more recently also in the MoCo, the quite new museum, the MoCo Montpellier, if I'm not wrong. She co-authored the monograph Zone de sécurité temporaire in 2017, which has been awarded as the best photography book of the Festival International du Livre d'Art et du Film in 2017. And a recent work, Terre, Sol Profond du Grand Paris, which is more or less the title of the lecture for tonight, Earth, Deep Soils of Greater Paris, have been published this year and exhibited also at the Hamburg Triennale this year. So I will let Anne-Marie introduce herself, her practice, her position to look the territory before I introduce this more specific topic of the deep soil of Greater Paris. So another way to to look at Paris and the landscape of Paris through the eyes of a political gaze by photography. Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. I'm delighted to respond to this invitation. So just please be lenient with my English because I don't travel this last time. I would like to introduce you the way, I'm going to present you the work I did, the work on the excavated soil of the Greater Paris. But I would like to introduce you to the way I came to this subject of the earth and to my background, to my parcours. This is important because I have all this experience behind me that I have come to deal with the subject of the earth. From this long journey, I have, of course, made a choice for this presentation. So I live in Paris. I have been photographing landscapes for the last 30 years. I'm interested in the notion of temporality in the landscape. At the beginning, I photographed my modest territory, the Auvergne, in France. Then I went to work in more distant territories, on borders, difficult borders, in different cultures, especially in the Middle East regions, Asia and East Africa. There has always been a lot of politics in my landscapes. I'm a field photographer. The landscape for me is the most real and the most abstract thing at the same time. It's an absolutely extraordinary subject to be able to express oneself, a subject sufficiently abstract, sufficiently vast to rush into it. Landscape, it's above all for me, something which resists you. It's a writing tool. This poster, in introduction, is the one of my retrospective exhibition at the Museum of Civilizations of Europe and the Mediterranean in Marseille in 2017. This exhibition presented the work I did in the Middle East, where I traveled and did field work for 15 years. In 1997, I participated in the mission of the Photographic Observatory of the Landscape, one of the great commissions on the French landscape that followed that of the data, and whose goal was to photograph landscapes over time to document their evolution. This mission implied a methodology. It's a very technical work. This is something that has structured my work a lot afterwards. So I told you about the landscape as a tool. Now here is the tool. I use this is my camera, a medium format, a point-axis set, from which I remove the prism to show you that there is a squared glass in the finder. This square frosted glass is the tool that allows me to reproduce the frame. I take very precise field surveys. It's a technical work. So this example to show you a methodology. Here in 1997, a point of view in Haute-Loire, Auvergne in France. The choice of the point of view belongs to me in this observatory, and I have a schedule of conditions which stipulates the problem to be pointed out, like, for example, the management of the private forest, the remarkable sites. So 1997, 1999, 2000. I was carrying out this mission in Auvergne, in the Livradois Forest Park, where I come from. And for this reason, it took on a very particular meaning for me, because I could make it my own to tell things that concern me. And then, in parallel to this mission and to this territory where I return every year to make the same image, the same images, I like for other territories in the Near and Middle East regions to make other images. So my work was built on these comings and goings between these distant landscapes and these fixed images that I came back to question every year. So I had these fixed points, which were those of my modest territory, in fact. The idea of the observatory was to photograph landscapes over time to see how they evolve. At that time, all the publications present this work in a comparative form. We played a little game of the 7 eras. What I did was to take the opposite approach of that. In my photos, I tried to show the permanency. I was interested in reproducing not the landscape, but the image. So I built an abstract work. This mission in the Livradois Forez, I did it during 7 years, and then again in 1999, 2009, and 2019. Here are some pages of a book to show you what forms these images take when there is accumulation. I like this dimension of abstraction, of the abstract of the landscape. It is really a very particular attention to the landscape to observe it in this way. It is a work on the light, on the matter. Everything is carried by the light in this work. To rephotograph an image is to rephotograph a light at first. So some examples. This review of the Ministry of Environment. One sees the site of Livradois, which I photographed. The second image and the third were taken the same year. I preserved the third one in the restitution of the mission. I was looking for light. I was looking to build a plastic form. The image that I removed for this one was this one. Yes, this one is beautiful, but it did not correspond to the initial image, whose shadow in the foreground is very strong. That's why I came back to find this light. Okay. Let me come back. No. Yes. Okay, so you see, I found the shadow. Okay. Let me find my way. Okay. To go to the events, photograph time is here also to gather this time in a book. Here is the book. In this book that I have published on my own account are 7 years of photographs. This book is kept in the collection of the Niepce Museum in Chalon-sur-Saône, the Museum of the History of Photography. This book gathers photographs, but also notes, text, because I always write next to the image, the images. For me, writing is something important. So, here a view of the exhibition Paysage Français at the French National Library in 2017. This observatory, this methodology, I moved it informally in 2004 in the Middle East at the time of the construction of the separation wall between Israel and the Palestinian territories, because it made sense to carry out this work there at that time to observe the erasing of a landscape, I would say. These images are very telling here in 2006 and 2007 in the suburbs of Jerusalem. So I imagine that each of you know about this wall in Palestine. At the time I was doing this work, this region of the world was ultra-mediatized, ultra-publicized. On TV and radio every year, we heard about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This was a period of extreme tension because at that moment, contact was broken between the populations. It's a conflict of territory and therefore an economic and political conflict. In the media, we did not see any images of the territory. We were only shown images of attacks and checkpoints. At that time, I found myself confronting continual rupture in the landscape. I began making field surveys in the borders areas around Jerusalem when passing there. I repeatedly photographed the same places to record their evolutions, to find the landmarks. I was not trying to represent this confinement, but I was working in it. At that time, my photography was also transformed. It took the form of panoramas. Because the space was closing, I started to turn on myself. The space was closing, and paradoxically, it unfolded in my photography. This allows me to tell you that photography is something very physical. It is an act of the whole. I'm a field photographer. Working in these territories demanded that I settle there long term, to encounter this violence and the need to bear witness to it. So it's a field, counter-field, in the suburbs of Jerusalem before the construction of the wall in 2004. This picture with the wall is the same as the previous one of the top, of the one of the top. Yes. Except that the wall passes through the valley. It is 2 years later. These landscapes have a certain softness because of the curves of the light. But what is the most violent in these images is the emptiness, the absence of people. Also in these regions, people live in public spaces. Here we are at the foot of the Mount of Olives at the time of the closure of Jerusalem. You can see the construction of the checkpoint that will separate Jerusalem from its eastern suburbs. Here it's Calandia, this strip of land. Is today the international border that separates Ramallah from the Jerusalem municipality. When you see these pictures on the wall on television, completely tagged, full of graffiti, of this transit zone, well, it's there. This image, I took it before the construction of this frontier. In the collective unconscious of people, these places have meaning. It's true that we know the places thanks to the images that we have of them. So for me, it was important to make images of the landscapes of Palestine at that time, when all that was fading, disappearing. Here too, I wanted to gather in the time, these images, these large banners, all these landscapes, I put them together. I made a film with 4 years of images, with names of the places and the dates of the shooting, and which has for title Confinement. Just as I made a book for the observatory, here I made a film. Here is the cover of this book, Zone de sécurité temporaire. It's a monograph that brings together my travels from the Auvergne through all the Middle East, Asia, and then Yemen, Eritrea, Egypt, Algeria, until 2014 in Jordan, when Syria closed its borders. At that time, I worked on the border between Jordan and Syria. So I'm going to arrive now to the Parisian earth. This is the cover of the book Terre, Sol profond du Grand Paris, that I published in 2020 aux éditions La Découverte, and for which Claude Evenot wrote the text. In 2018, when I learned about all these excavated soil that were being stored in sites around Paris, I immediately understood that the topic would be of interest to me. At that time, I had just returned to Egypt and my work was constrained for political reasons. Then I won a call for projects from the French embassy to work in Algeria. Again, I was refused a visa. So I was then free to engage myself in this work. I approached a ETH group, which works with the excavation companies, recovers all the soil, stores it, and reuses it, and which allowed me access to its sites, located about 50 kilometers all around Paris. So I'm just going to explain to you why I got interested in this subject. What is the excavated soil of Greater Paris? I don't know if there are any Parisians among you, but you know, we live in the works in Paris for 5, 6, 7 years now. Paris is becoming the Greater Paris, has already become the Greater Paris. This extension of the territory is done by the extension of a network, that of the Grand Paris Express, the future Parisian metro. To do this metro line, it's necessary to dig the subsoil of Paris. Okay, pardon, je reviens. There are gigantic quantities of earth which are excavated from the subsoil for the digging of the 200 kilometers of this future metro. It is 45 million tons of earth in the long term for the digging of the metro. There are also all the infrastructures linked to the extension of Paris, that is to say, the works of the BTP, therefore the Habitat, the works linked to the future Olympic Games, etc. So 22 million tons of earth are excavated each year. So it is a titanic work site, titanic chantier, which is on the scale of the transformations of Haussmann's Paris in the 19th century. I wanted to give you this comparison because it's an enormous transformation, and we don't always realize it, except that the space is completely upset. All the codes are modified at present in Paris. All this happens under our feet. The not excavated earths are very deep earths that have no legal status and become waste when they leave the site, the right of way of their excavation, and are moved. No, they are moved 50 kilometers all around Paris on sites that receive the earth. So it's an image of the extension of the territory. So I approached a city group which manages these sites to do this work. They gave me carte blanche to work on these places, which are sometimes immense deserts, immense urban deserts, places close to the public. So I had the possibility to have access to these places, to these sites. So here is a view of the exhibition I presented at the Biennale Paysage and Architecture in Versailles in 2019. The exhibited photos here are published in the book Terre that I showed you before. In fact, I've been doing this work for more than 3 years. It's a work on the long time. I specify it. I'm a photographer who works on the long time, whether it is here in Paris, whether it is in Palestine, whether it is around a city like Phnom Penh in 2002. I really settle into the long term when I work. So I started to photograph the excavated soil of Greater Paris at the end of 2018. I published the first opus of this work, Terre, Sol Profond du Grand Paris, aux éditions La Découverte in 2020. At that time, I met journalists. My book is debated because I make visible the mixing and the underground trade of these layers of soil. I make visible a real environmental problem that few people are aware of. I show you this map, the watershed of the earth, le bassin versant de la terre. This map shows the flow of earth transported by truck to an ECT site in one day. ECT is the name of the group. This site is the one of Villeneuve-sous-Damartin, which is close to the airport of Roissy-Charles de Gaulle. I'm going to show you the images today of this place, of this site of Villeneuve-sous-Damartin. Because I work on many sites, but I just show you images of this one. I really like the idea of the flow and the watershed. So in 2021, so I published in 2020. In 2021, I continue to observe almost daily from January until December the arrival of the earth on the sites. The pictures I show you today are pictures taken on the site of Villeneuve-sous-Damartin near Roissy-Charles de Gaulle. This is a period of confinement. This is Paris. I was very aware that when I photographed this earth, it was Paris that I was photographing. In these construction sites, which are forbidden to the public, where I am the only authorized photographer, I photograph lights, colors, materials. I see the extent of the territory that moves. I see the places that move. I work early or after the departure of the trucks, sometimes until nightfall. I photograph the state of the landscape that disappears at the same time that I photograph it. I record the memory of the land, its transformation. So the top picture here is the outside of a site of a locker, a casier into French. And the bottom picture is the inside of the locker. You see, these are large infrastructure of earth. In the bottom photos, the earth looks like stars. This is a picture I took in 2021. This is the soil of the tunnelier machines. The tunnel boring machines are the huge rotors that dig the galleries of the future Parisian subway called the Grand Paris Express. The molecules of the soils are broken by these rotors, which gives them this metallic and bluish aspect. And there is no water in it, even if it looks like a bit like mud. By the way, the people who work on the construction site call it mud. But it's just because the molecules of earth are broken that it has this aspect. The year 221 is witnessing the arrival of this earth, of the tunnelier. So you see, with this image, it was for me something very particular to do this work. First of all, because the country was confined, and that I had the freedom to go out and go to these places, which were like big deserts. It was very big, very, very vast. And I was in full freedom in this place, in these spaces. And then at the same time, I was also confined in these spaces because the places are closed to the public. And sometimes I locked up. There is this paradoxical dimension in the image. As I spoke to you earlier in Palestine about the softness and the forms, about this beauty and this violence instituted by the absence, here there is also this paradox of emptiness and fullness, of freedom and confinement. So here are some more pictures of this site. One could sometimes think of a liquid element, but it's really earth. So in order to show you how I follow the evolution of these sites and make an archive of my work, I have prepared a second slideshow that I will present to next after this one. This site, so Villeneuve-sous-Damartin, is implanted on all the sand pits. There is also around agricultural fields on which the site extended. You will see on the final, agricultural fields are restored on the top of the sites. So here are some working boards, which I also like to present in this atmospheric form. So I work here with a digital camera without a tripod. I wanted to be very free, to be very mobile to do this work. I have worked for more than 25 years in black and white and analogic photography. In analogic photography, we work with film. The film is a surface, like a pin. For the earth, I wanted to work in color, to photograph colors, lights, material. Digital photography made sense because this way of making images, it's a scan. You can see the landscape, you go deep into it. On the sites, the eye works a lot. I worked for hours in these sites. I came after the departure of the trucks. I walked on the ground. I felt the ground moving, the push of the earth on the side of the cases, the days of rain, of heat. For the photos published in the book, I worked with a telephoto lens. In 2021, I opened the field, I raised the gaze, I used a 35mm lens. I also regularly observe what is happening outside the site. So here we are outside. And there I work at twilight, at the end of the day. I like this atmosphere very much. So my work is presented at the Hamburg Triennale in 2022. I selected some boards for the show. I show some other photos, but I also selected the boards. Here, what is very surprising, this anthropomorphic side, it looks like a body. Yes, it's very anthropomorphic. I found it really beautiful. It is an almost daily observation that allows us to document and also to anticipate what you are going to see. There, I went back in time. It's a photo of the book. This is the same site in 2019, while it is in preparation. So we can see the agricole lands. Where is the site? Here, it's a very telling image. The method of the observatory that I reproduced. It's the filling of the basin. Exactly the same image at the end of 2021 when the basin fills up. For me, there is a lot of aesthetic in all these yards, in the lands. So I show you also some, so it's a photo of the earth. Here I show you another photo, another page of the book, another site, Forges-les-Bains in Essonne, South Paris. I like very much to look at the sites as entities in their own right. Each site has its identity, its personality. It can be underground galleries, which are filled in, clay quarries, like here at Forges-les-Bains. Villeneuve is a very large site, almost 200 hectares, Villeneuve-sous-Damartin, the one I showed you before. Annette, a site in Seine-et-Marne, which is very big too, stuck between TGV lines, high voltage power lines, highways, hard to photograph. This is a page of the book, a page of the text, Paysage des Profondeurs, of the writer and urbanist Claude Evenot, published in this book. The illustration is by Jérôme Bosch, the creation of the world. These are the exterior panels of the Garden of Delights, 1504. On the last page of the book. So I want to show you how I archive my work. I took the selection. This is a selection because I have made hundreds of plates. All the work I did, so I make photos until 219 and 20. Then I make the book during the confinement, and I published the book in September 2020. So at the end of the confinement, and then we are confined again into 21. So in 2021, I observed the sites every day, and I constitute an archive. So all this archive is not published yet. So I show you how I archive my work. Just before, what link between landscapes where the expression of politics is everywhere with the wall and the Grand Paris in an entry into politics? The questions once asked me. So it is an underground economy. It's huge economic stakes and it's not visible. For me, these are philosophical questions. These are fundamental political choices. I started to be interested in it because I have been teaching at Sciences Po Paris since 2011, and I work in Paris with students. I had read Nicolas Sarkozy's speech in 2009 that launched the Grand Paris consultation, and he said the Grand Paris when we won't talk about the suburbs anymore, and to change the way we apply the law. So that's what happened now. What is happening now in Paris? Everything is changed. The law is changed. So on the 9th of January here on the photo, I find the site manager early morning on the site of Villeneuve-sous-Damartin. So you see, I come early morning. It's very cold, and the voyage is beginning. The site is filled in. A new basin is being built here above the previous one. It is very cold. It is freezing, and I immediately understand that day that I must work with light. I also decide to raise my gaze at this moment. It's possible to take off the green now or not? No, no, it's not. Okay. Okay. So you see, it's like a bit of a volcano because of the. It's just very cold. Here, so I make some maquettes. Also, when I work, I find myself here in front of the image from the book that I showed you earlier, where you can see the thickness of the earth. A little later, I go around the locker, casier. I look inside, but also outside. I'm also interested in the margins, the limits, the peripheries. There is nobody, not a plane, not a person, not an animal, nothing. It's confinement. So working models, maquettes. So for 4 hours, 3 hours, I will walk around the place, and then I work on my images at home. I make boards, I build models in a very fast, very intuitive way to have a memory. So this is one. And with this image, I was thinking here of Nicolas de Staël because of the aplat of the colors of masses. I think you know the painter, Nicolas de Staël. So I look around, the site is in the far, and I turn around. Early morning here, I go to the site very early morning or late after the departure of the tribes. So another maquette. So you see the evolution of the site during the year. I put some details. So you see all these documents, nothing is done with that. So all this is under construction, it's not finished yet. So I'm in the landscape, I travel in these mineral landscapes. There is sometimes a little bit of American desert in these photos. You see like that. Here I continue. We move forwards in time. We approach spring soon. So you can see the evolution of the landscape. Because I photograph a landscape that is the transformation of a landscape, but this, which itself transforms the big landscape. I'm also interested in the spontaneous vegetation that grows on these sites. We're talking about the Anthropocene period. This deep earth, this inert earth, are soils that have never been touched by man. They were there 3,000 years ago and would be there in 3,000 years if we didn't touch them. Their excavation brings them into contact with the other elements and transforms them. This inert earth associated with compost become fertile substrates. This ground then has the aspect of cardboard. You can see that a bit here. They are called technosoil. In the past, it was peasants, farmers who created the landscapes. Today, it is the engineers. Land become an economy. So you see some details of the spontaneous vegetation. Evolution. Another walking boards. See, I have an anecdote. I was at the time of the presidential elections in France. I was at home drinking the cafe, and I listened to the radio, and Emmanuel Macron did a campaign and spoke on the radio the last day before the end of the speeches, you know, and Elias Salamé, a French journalist, asked him, so what is the project of your second quinquennat? And he answers, the recycling of waste and the circular economy. So I can't stop myself thinking of the earth, you know. And it's just to talk about economy, of all this underground economy. So other working boards, you can see the casier here. So the inside and the outside, it's not completely finished, but you see there is nobody. It's period of confinement. So these photos are also testimony of this period. The soil of the tunnelier. Some others. I worked in the evening at dusk and on full moon nights because there is a great deal of light. This site of Villeneuve, Soudamartin, is surrounded by space because it is near an airport zone. That feeling of space, that feeling of isolation becomes stronger because of that. When I make photo, I'm facing a disappearance, a transformation. It's a little bit of archaeology in reverse. This dimension of archive is important here. This dimension of the archive allows us to look carefully afterwards. The eye works a lot when we are on the sites. There is a kind of éblouissement, of glare. And then there is also the physical contact with the earth. At the beginning, you walk in something very soft, and then the earth is hardening. I come back on the mic first. When I work, all my attention, it is carried towards this relation with the earth, this very direct relationship to the ground, to the light. I'm obliged to make images at the same time that I experience, that I look, that I walk, I photograph, and I constitute a memory. The view, so it's a work on time. I'm constantly there. In the plate, you see the shadow, this character that allows to have a reference point sometimes. It was in the previous photos. So for me, this document here, it's more an urban planning document, interior and exterior of the locker before it closes on itself. all these things have disappeared now. I just photographed the movement of the soil, but now it's finished. Some other branch. I like these accumulations of time, of spaces. So it's like big deserts. I choose to show you some so that you are aware of what is an observation. I extract images, I put together a series. It's a wool work that happens inside these sets to build an exhibition, a book, a reflection. I think it was 10:30 at night. It was solstice d'été this day. Another locker is going to be built here. I'm walking on the floor. This is a locker. So, you know, I just selection some ensemble. Here, the exterior of the locker. You can see the good earth, the last earth of the territoire agricole de Seine-et-Marne. Here, I'm outside the site, the agricultural land that will be moved in 2022 on the summit. So one of the last views I made in winter at Down. Another new basin is continuity of the continuity of the previous one. So sometimes we can think of water, but it's not water. And so the lands that came in June 2022, and the lands you saw before moved in on the top of the locker. So I'm going to stop there my presentation with the photos.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
if you have any question, I try to answer.
Absolutely. Well, now we can open moment of discussion. I don't know if some of you have already some elements to ask. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think I have two questions. One is more related to the selection of sites. Do you know how they are chosen? I mean, why this space in the territory? And the other question was a bit more about your way of working, because these images, they're quite impressive. And do you stop there and say, okay, I let the immensity of the image work, or do you then do another research on saying, okay, this is this type of material, or knowing a bit more where it comes from, or is this not part of your work?
Okay, thank you. So I start with the second one, and then I will come to the first. I'm a field photographer, so the way of working for me is just to go on the places, on the sites, and to walk, and just to walk and to look. And so that's what I said. The eye is working a lot because earth everywhere, light everywhere. When there are trucks, it's hundreds of trucks every day, so it's quite dangerous also. So, but I prefer to come when there is no trucks because my subject is the earth. Okay, so but so I walk for hours in these lands And I want to tell Ossie that I would like to write about I feel doing this work, because it's something just crazy, you know, it's a crazy work. From 1 year, I just walk in the earth. And so it's just walking in the places. I could see the earth changing. I could see the push of the earth on the edge. I could feel everything, you know. So the way I work is just walking, looking, photographing, and it's just that. But it's you know, I have 30 years of work behind me, so I know what I want. When I work, the field work is, I know exactly what I do, but I never know what will happen. But it's the purpose of the field work, you know. So that's how I work. And why these sites? So so I approached the ETH group to do this work. So ETH has a site all around Paris that reception the earth. Okay, so what are these sites? That is the question. Okay, for example, here you see. Let me take my paper, because I wrote this somewhere. Okay, I don't know if I will find it. Sometimes it's des carrières d'argile.
Clay quarries?
Yes.
Quarries?
Okay.
Clay quarries?
Yes. Sometimes d'anciennes sablières, sand.
Former sand quarries?
Okay, so this one is this at the beginning, but this is 200 hectares. So it's very huge, and the extension is go on the agricultural lands, you know. Sometimes it's it depends, you know, but it's a good question, because where we put this earth is, you know, so it's very political, this subject, you know. So I don't know, I don't have all the answers. Okay. But I work, each site has a personality, and I like to look at the sites like entities. It's like I go in these areas and I just look like, I'm sorry, my English is not so fluent, but I try my best.
And then, sir, it's not so easy, because you're fascinating by the object as well, I suppose.
Yes.
Maybe, yeah, more question here. You can follow. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. It's very impressive images. And you mentioned about a kind of urban planning in those landscapes. And I was wondering, the idea of urbanization without this kind of protocol with urban settlements, human settlements, the idea of city that we have. And I was wondering if you can develop more about this idea of urbanization without the city itself, and what kinds of traces of urbanization you see in those types of landscapes.
Okay. You see in these areas, these sites, which are closed on themselves, okay, I photographed the earth. There is nothing but earth, okay? So of course, what I'm interested in the people, I'm interested of everything that is happening all around in the, but I focalize my regard on these places, on the earth, okay? You asked me about the urbanization. That's the question.
Yes, like what kind of urbanizations you see in those places to talk about as a urban planning?
Urban planning, right? For example, this site, it's a very huge one. It's just, it's extractivist because you have to be conscious that this is extractivist. That's what's happened in Paris. And it's, to make this, this site will become, on each site, it will be something different. For example, some sites, it's zone photovoltaic. Another one, it's a place for des parcours santé, des arboretums, des zones de protection pour des espèces d'oiseaux rares.
Protected areas or healthy passes or depends on
the place.
It's not
Okay.
zoning, no?
This one, it's a project of land art. So I will put this for this name of land art. You know, usually when you have project of urbanism, I'm not an urbanist, I'm not an architect, I'm a photographer, but when you have a project of urbanism, normally, all the huge infrastructure, all the huge project, you need to have something artistic in the.
1%, no?
I don't know if it's the 1%. I am not sure. Maybe what is the definition of this? But to have the stamp and to have the money, you have this case to be okay. Understand? So on this one. It's a land art project and made by an architect, Antoine Grembach. I don't know if you know him. And on the top of this very huge site, two eyes, les yeux du ciel, the eyes of the skies, will be drawn. So when you will arrive on the airport with the plane, you will see two eyes looking at you. This is the project of London. So I don't comment this project, but I don't know if I answer very well to your question. I'm not sure to understand it very well. I understand it very well, but I try to say you things.
Antoine Grembach was also the one proposing to reframe the Grand Paris competition through the territorial figure of the Seine from Paris to the sea, actually. So it is this kind of approach of territorial approach. But I didn't know that some of the picture you were showing were supposed to be permanent. But everything is not moving. So these two eyes will stay, no?
End, it will be finished. It's soon. It will be finished. I think it was supposed to be finished for 2024 for the Olympic Games, but
Okay.
it will be finished at 2027. But yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
Just more of an observation first, that it's there's an incredible stillness and a beauty about these images, that there's no, well, obviously they're photographs so they can't move, but the objects are, I just sense it's almost, some of the scenes, it's almost like a glacial process. It seems very slow, and yet the processes that form these things are actually full of energy and motion and huge human effort. And I think you maybe explained already that you focus on the landscape and the earth, and not the process that creates these places. And and I'm just wondering, do you see yourself as a historical? Are you documenting something for the sake of history, or what's your thinking behind? these things?
Yes, it's important. Thank you for your question. And yes, I am conscient that it's important to do this work because nobody can see that if I didn't photograph these places, we won't have any images of this. So for me, it's important. Yes, it's a documentation. It's an archive. But you know, I would like to work with other person to use this material to do something, to have a reflection of it, because my work is talking about it's a political subject, but it's also an ecological subject, a human subject, a social subject, and I talk about ruptures. I talk about frontiers. I talk about public earth. You know, there are so many links to in this subject. So for me, it was focalizing. When I focalize myself on this subject, I have the conscience that I can just it's sufficiently free that now we are able to use it and to talk with this subject, because there is no how can I say, the subject is the earth, so with the earth we can say everything, you know, and it's a very aesthetic subject also for a photographer, and also I was related to this notion of the sacred also with the earth, you know, all this notion is the sum of all the things. So I don't know how to answer into English. I'm sorry. Let me see. Yes. Yes, that's what I said. If I do hold this, it's not only for the beauty of the gesture, but it is because it has meaning above all. That's what you asked me, you know. And the most important thing for me now is to share it. And I would like to work as a collective with all these archives. And it allows us to be a witness. Yes, these are great philosophical questions, political issues, and I'm a committed photographer in the missions I carry out. So I go until the end, and it's important for me to share this work. Okay, if you have any other questions, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, on that, I wanted just to say that I was very surprised when you said that these places are forbidden of access, and actually you are the only one that have access to these photos. It added to your work it makes your work even more impacting for when knowing that. And actually you are showing in these photos not so much fences, not so much limits.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's choice from the photographer, the same choice you made when you did not photograph the site manager, for example, or the people that are working here, or the people that are doing this process.
Yeah.
Actually, this process is much more shown by series of static photos, not from the movement or from the people that are doing so. And I don't know if you were also so if you wanted to make explicit the disappearance of the fence and the limit, because when looking at all these pictures, we have a weird sensation of freedom, a weird sensation of infinite, in a way that it's really open access and totally, also because there is no people, so we can project ourselves, and maybe when you play with your own shadow, it's probably the only presence of human presence in your photos is probably your shadow. It's telling a counterintuitive story of this site that they looks places of freedom, but they're not.
They're not. Yes, yes. There is something paradoxal all the time, and I like that. And this image is, it's Paris, it's Paris, but it's Paris that is transforming, extending its frontiers, and I show something that is happening in another place, in the underground of Paris, and we can see this in these sites, but if I don't photograph this, nobody can see it, And during the confinement, everybody was inside, but the workers, the VTP was working a lot, and so it was me. I had the conscience of what I did. It was something very important for me to document this this extension of the capital, and it's just incredible. Its quantity of earth, it's like, I think of an image, it's an equivalent of 4 pyramids of Cheops each year. On, more, and then the Grand Paris Express, in addition, 45 million tons of earth. So it's just incredible, So you can see also this huge desert. It's just
a monument.
A monument.
Yeah.
And just to tell you something I'm thinking of, for me, it's important to show these documents because first when I published in 2020, my many journalists and everyone was shouting with my book, and because it makes the debate, because I talk about things that nobody can see. And now this period of the confinement in 2021, the sites became monumental. So all this is, I would like to do something with that because I show you a very small part of the documents, but I have hundreds of boards. And I think it's a subject in itself, this earth. It's political, it's ecological, because all the earth is, the earth are tracé. They have, if there is pollution, they don't go in the site, they go somewhere else. All this is money also, very often you can see papers in the press about the Grand Paris is too expensive and blah, 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 because too much pollution.
Because of
become a lot, But now, Earth it's money, and the extension of the capital is just something. It's important to be conscient of this way of this, and maybe the immensity that you can see in the photos can talk about that. I don't know.
Just to clarify, your tools are the photos and the text also, you said. So by writing, it's also a tool. Do you use other tools like map? Because you show one map, but it's not yours, I suppose. So maps or drawing, or it's not your, or data, they are not your devices.
But I like to write. I always write after my travels, etc. But here I'm looking, I'm searching for a place for writing about the earth, because I would like to write about what I feel, because it's very personal, what I feel, what I did. And it's 3 years. So I would like to write about these 3 years in the earth, but it's complicated because I need a time, I need a space, I need some money to do that, and residency for photography, it's to make photos, residencies for writings for fiction writers. So I'm looking for a place to do that.
And just
But I want
about
to do that.
just about your tools, you talk about models, maquette,
Yes.
and here in the School of Architecture, can you clarify a bit what you
Yes, for me, for example, this is
what is a maquette in your
maquette. This, for example, I make
a model?
hundreds of photos in one day, working on the site. And then when I come back home, I look at my photos and I selection, I make a selection of these photos and I make a planche like this, a board. And sometimes from these boards, I make maquette. This is a maquette.
Okay.
I just check off one, or sometimes there is
Sometimes
montage,
3, yeah.
just to have a memory, something I do very fast to keep a memory. That's what I call this maquettes.
Okay.
Now,
Maybe you have other, yeah,
Thanks for the presentation. I guess a slightly different question. I know you sort of said the process is not your interest, or it's the image, so it's neither the landscape nor the process. But did you ever consider photographing the reverse and photographing the digging or the tunnel in Paris and sort of where this is coming from?
where the earth is coming from? No, I don't, because I'm just living in Paris. I live in this big yard for years. That's what I said. And what is moving, but thank you for the question, because I can say something, is that what is moving in this big chantier, this big site, is that I can see the earth coming from many places of Paris, many chantiers for building a building. And all this earth is mixing together and it's something, also all this come from all the places in Paris for all the chantiers, and from Paris and Ile-de-France, they mix together. It's something which is moving. And something I can say also about the earth of the Tunnelier, who are digging the Grand Paris Express. When I was walking in these huge sites, there is no smell of the earth. We can imagine that with so many earth, there are a lot of other smell of the earth, but no, it's very deep earth, and so we don't have the smell of like after the rain or something like that. It's quite special.
Actually, the RATP or the I don't remember the company, the public transport company for the Grand Paris Express, did a reportage of the Tunnelier doing the tunnel, because it's a quite monumental also work and,
Yes.
and a piece of art of engineering. And actually, they are quite they are promoting the very innovative or immense gigantic machine that are doing the tunnels, and they are doing exhibition, public exhibition. I mean, they are advertising these works, but they didn't show this aspect, this other side of the.
For me, it's very important. This. Yes, but I was not interested in going. I can go everywhere. I can photograph the Tunnelier. I can photograph the workers. I can photograph. It's not my purpose, My purpose is the earth, this landscape, which is transforming itself and which is transforming the big landscape. And I'm working on the transformation. Before it was because I came back each year to look to photograph again the landscape that allowed me to see the transformation. At that time, it was the transformation itself that I was photographing.
And do you plan to come back in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years?
So the question is now what I'm going to do with this this archive, because
Is it closed? The archive is closed, finished, or?
I don't know if I will come back. I don't know. For me, it's finished, because now the site is finished. All this disappear. It's finished. It's like a mountain. You have béton, des parkings, beginning
Parkings,
open
concrete.
to the public. So it's all this is finished. So okay, I can continue, but it was this very moment of the transformation that I wanted to photograph. I wanted to photograph the earth. So it's a moment where the earth comes from very deep. Nobody see this earth before, because it was so deep and never touched by man. And then it's now mixed and covered.
It's not a body anymore.
Yes.
Okay.
So I just photographed this. And this is Paris.
Nice conclusion. I don't know if someone have another comments or.
But if you have ideas of how using these documents, yes, just don't hesitate.
There is a question on Zoom, and here we can. Petra, I don't know if you can try to speak.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, we have a speaker.
Thank you. I do have a question. I'm very sorry. I missed the first half an hour of the lecture, so I don't know if you've already given this explanation or not, but it's very daunting, especially in these images that you've shown, that you have a very flat horizon. And I mean, it just looks like it's this whole earth that comes from Paris is being put in an excavated, sorry, it's a Grube in German. So in a hole, basically. And this is a bit my questions, because in some of the pictures you can see the landscape, which is quite flat, and then you have mounds of earth. But then in other pictures, it just looks like the whole place is excavated before in order to make space for this excavated earth that comes and is being brought there. So how exactly is this place prepared before bringing all this earth from Paris?
Just because sometimes it's difficult to recognize the level of reference. Where is the ground, and so.
Yes, it's difficult.
Yes.
The DHL, it's difficult to. Yes.
So for instance, if you look at the fourth row, the left image where you see a bit of green, that's, I assume, the level of the landscape, no? And then it goes deeper, I don't know how many meters, 10, 15 meters, or there as well. So it does go up and then it also goes down. So my question is, where it's not just piled up in the middle of the territory, no, all this earth. It has been, a certain area has been prepared to take in all this excavated place. So how is this place actually being prepared?
I'm not sure I understand. How is the place? Comment le lieu a été préparé?
A été préparé, oui. Est-ce qu'il a été d'abord creusé pour être rempli, ou bien parce que parfois ce sont des ajouts, parfois ce sont des creux?
Oui. Here, exactly, this site here, Villeneuve, I show the photos that I show you today is always the same place. Only one place, okay, which is transforming. But at the beginning, it's, yes, it was, we dig it. let me show you the photo. Yes, this is the site, you know.
So the level of
Mhm.
reference is this
The
one,
level
no?
of the earth
Yeah.
is there. Okay, we dig it and then we fill it. And then we built like another basin above and we fill it.
So,
And
so,
then we
yeah.
built another basin near the other one and we fill it, you know, and then another one and we fill it. Sometimes another one above the other one. So
That's a bit my question. Is this actually maybe a gravel pit where you excavate the gravel to use it for the concrete to be used somewhere in the city to be built with? And then this gravel pit is being then filled with all this excavated earth. So where does all this earth go to?
Ça commence par une carrière de gravier, non? Ça commence par un trou et
oui,
ensuite,
ça c'est des anciennes sablières.
okay,
qui
it's
sont-
former sand quarries, exactly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
at the very beginning, you start with a hole, no? And
Yes.
then you feed it and
Yes.
and maybe you feed it with the earth of another basin, no? It's
Yes.
like a,
And when I published the book, I photographed all this period. And then the book, and then I photographed in 2021 what is a pond and what is building like monuments.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Anne-Marie. I think your presentation and the discussion has shown that the big infrastructure have been the driving force of urbanism, urban development, urban extension, and for many years. And it not only because the urban extension, but also because of all these resources and waste that are very impacting the territory around. Actually, your work is impacting also because the waste are not so far from when they come from.
Yeah.
But this type of documentation could be done for many resources around the world, places where we extract some resources from iPhones for many other needs that are very far away from the place that they are consumed. Here you are showing something quite local in a way.
Yes,
50 kilometers is not so much in between the.
Soil from deep soil without juridic statute. Okay, we are excavated and take the. It's called waste to be displaced, you know, and put 50 kilometers all around Paris, the Grand Paris. So it's the extension of territory.
Yeah. But it's absolutely something that can be
Yeah.
reconsidered in many territories and probably at many scales. So thank you very much for showing your position, your tools, and how you. And this also open work, because you said I still have something to say from that. So here the door is open and we will have the pleasure to discuss.
Thank you very much.
later.
I'm sorry for my English, but I think the subject was stronger in
Yeah,
itself.
it's visual, so it photos
sorry.
speak as well very, very well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's easy. The time.